Hello friends, welcome to my channel. How are you all? I hope you are doing well, wherever you are. May you be happy. May God keep you happy like this, grant you a long and healthy life. May God remove the troubles of those who are suffering, grant good health to those who are ill, and forgive those who have departed from this world. From the title and thumbnail, you must have already guessed what this story is about. This story will also be interesting for you. Listen to the story till the end, and don't forget to share your opinion in the comments. Now, let's move on to our story. But before we begin, surround yourself with its protection, because it is said that when these creatures are mentioned, they take a keen interest and come closer to listen. To make sure you don't feel scared, now let's start our story. My name is Fatima, and I'm 21 years old. I am from a town outside India. I have been listening to your channel for quite some time, every night and even during the day whenever I feel bored. And for a long time I have wanted to share my own story, an important incident from my life. I don't know what to call it, but I wanted to share it with you. In my family, I have two elder brothers, my father and my mother. This story begins when I was around 14 to 15 years old. I was in school at that time and used to visit my cousin's village frequently. My cousin worked in our town while his wife stayed in the village. Every weekend he would visit the village and return on Sunday. I often accompanied him because I was very attached to my sister-in-law. I would stay there for a week and return with my cousin the following Sunday. It was winter, and like always, I went to the village with my cousin. The village was about an hour away from our city. After reaching there, I spent time with my sister-in-law. She had a son, and there were also other family members, including my elder aunt. Now, let me describe the village house to you. The house had rooms all around, and in the middle, there was a courtyard. In the farthest corner, there was a kitchen, and beyond that were the bathrooms. At that time, the village also had a lot of electricity issues. My brother had already returned to town, and I was still in the village. One night, my sister-in-law, her son, and I were all asleep. I usually stayed up late at night using my mobile phone. That night, my sister-in-law also went to sleep early, while I was still using my phone. I needed to go to the washroom, so I decided not to wake her up and go by myself. My phone was also out of charge, so I plugged it in for charging and picked up the torch that was kept in the room. Then I opened the door and looked around. That night there was no moon in the sky. Everything was engulfed in darkness and there was no electricity either. For a moment a shiver ran down my spine, but I composed myself, thinking I would quickly go and return. Nothing would happen. I placed my torch outside the washroom and went inside. When I came out, I saw a tall shadow standing right in front of me, around 10 feet tall. As soon as I saw it, everything turned black. When I regained consciousness, I didn't think or understand anything. I just ran as fast as I could toward my room. At that moment, fear had taken over me so completely that I couldn't even remember any prayer, not even Ayat al-Kursi, nor anything else. My vision was filled with deep darkness as I ran. I had even left my torch behind. Somehow, I managed to reach my room. I didn't tell my sister-in-law anything and just quietly lay down on my bed. I covered myself completely with a blanket from head to toe and started praying to God for help. Despite the cold weather, I was sweating profusely and tears kept flowing from my eyes. Since I was still young at the time, I didn't know what to do. I don't even remember when I finally fell asleep. In the morning when I woke up, I had a high fever, 102 degrees. As soon as I became conscious, the memories of the previous night came flooding back. I immediately asked my other cousin to take me home. Everyone tried to stop me, saying my health was getting worse. They even gave me some medicine, but I insisted and got into the car to return home. As soon as my mother saw me, she didn't say anything in front of my brother, but as soon as he left, she started telling my father, "Look at her, what's happened to her? Her face has turned pale, her eyes are sunken in. Just yesterday she was perfectly fine, and now look at her condition." A few days passed, and although my fever had gone down, my health kept deteriorating. One day when I went to the washroom and came out, I suddenly fainted. The next day I started smelling urine and cigarette smoke. This smell kept getting stronger with each passing day. One night, as I was sleeping, I felt that someone was near me. When I opened my eyes, I saw the same shadow standing there. I screamed loudly. Hearing my voice, my family members rushed to my side. When they asked me what had happened, I told them everything, what I had seen that night, from beginning to end. The next day my father called an experienced Amal, an elderly man. As soon as he entered the house, he looked at me with strange eyes. Or maybe he was looking behind me. He came closer to me and asked, "Do you smell urine, rotten meat, and cigarette smoke?" I nodded my head in agreement. He recited something and blew on me, then turned to my father and said, "A Kabiz is attached to her and wants to harm her." Hearing this, my family became very worried and asked him for help. The Amil instructed my father to bring a few things, such as a horseshoe, a green cloth, turmeric, and a few other items, and told him to have them ready by the next day. That very night, a terrible stench spread throughout our entire house. Everyone in my family could see the shadowy figure, and we were all extremely frightened. My mother stayed up the whole night reciting Surah Yasin. Somehow the night passed and morning arrived. The Amil came back and took me into a room. There he started performing Char Funk, which lasted for almost 3 hours. I should mention that I was unconscious at that time. I only remember entering the room. After that I remember nothing. Later my younger brother told me that when the Amil came out he was holding a small glass bottle. He said, "This Kabiz followed her from the village. Someone was performing a ritual, and this girl accidentally crossed its path, which enraged it, and it tried to harm her. But you called me at the right time." He then gave me a taweez, and after a few days I recovered. A few years passed peacefully. But after that incident, I started having a recurring dream. Sometimes, in my dreams, I would find myself standing alone near a graveyard, staring at a particular grave. And every time I had that dream, the next day, I would receive news of the death of a relative or someone we knew. This continued for a long time. I had no idea why or how it was happening, but it was happening. Moving forward, I should mention that the house we were living in was a rented one. After some time, my father built a house in the city and we shifted there. This house was in a new colony in the same city. Life was going well, but who knew that it was only for a short while. One evening, as I was returning home from my classes, it was the month of November. I had washed my hair that day, and since they were still wet, I had left them open. I was walking through a street that came right before the gate of our colony. It was around 5:30 p.m. and it was already quite dark. As soon as I reached that street, I felt as if someone was standing there watching me. I looked around but saw no one. Still, I felt that someone had just moved away from there. I saw it. I ignored it and walked a little further. As I kept moving forward, I felt like someone was following me. But whenever I turned around to look, there was no one there. I reached home, and as soon as I entered, my family noticed a very strong and pleasant fragrance coming from me. Everyone asked about it. I should mention that I was very fond of perfumes, so I assumed that they were appreciating the scent of my perfume. That night, after finishing dinner and other chores, I lay down on my bed and started using my phone. Eventually, I started feeling sleepy. After some time, I had a dream. In the dream, I saw a person dressed in white. His face was not visible to me, but his body emitted a very pleasant fragrance. Suddenly, my eyes opened, and I saw the same figure standing in front of me. I got scared and screamed loudly. My mother, father, and everyone else rushed to my room asking what had happened. I told them everything. They took my words seriously because similar incidents had happened to me before. My mother spent the entire night reciting verses from the Quran, and the next morning, the same Amil, spiritual healer, who had treated me before, was called again. When he arrived, he placed his hand on my head, closed his eyes, and started reciting something. When he opened his eyes, he looked troubled. He told my father, "This time a jinn has possessed the girl. When, how, and why, I cannot say right now. I will come back tomorrow." He gave me a taweez, protective amulet, and advised me to always take God's name and continue reciting the Quran. That night, I could constantly feel a presence around me. Sometimes I would sense that same fragrance, very faint, as if it was coming from far away. The next day, the Amil returned. He explained that one evening, I had unknowingly passed through an accursed place and named the exact alley. He said that a jinn had noticed me there and was drawn to the scent of my hair and body, which it found very pleasant. However, he reassured my family that this jinn was not evil. He said, "I have spoken to it and convinced it to stay away from the girl, and it has agreed." The Amil gave me a new taweez and took back the old one. My father then asked the Amil why this kept happening to me repeatedly. He explained, "Because of the past incidents, the girl has become very weak from within. Her body is now highly susceptible to such effects." A few days passed, and I did not encounter anything unusual again. However, a few months ago, strange things started happening to me once more. I would often feel an unseen presence around me, and many times the things I planned to do would somehow not happen. Many other odd occurrences started taking place. I also began having frequent disturbing dreams filled with countless snakes, darkness, and shadows. I couldn't understand anything. I asked my father, "Can you call that Amil Sahib to our house?" Papa replied, He is no longer in this world. A few months ago he passed away. He then asked me if something was wrong. I said no, nothing. A few days later, I was talking to an acquaintance and I shared everything with them. They told me that there was an Amil near their house and that they would speak to him on my behalf. They went to meet the Amil and gave him my name, my father's name, and my mother's name. The Amil looked up at the sky for a while and seemed to be talking to someone. Then my relatives asked him what the solution would be. The Amil said, "Bring a saffron-colored thread and some items like white and black cloth, cloves, etc." He told them to bring everything the next day. That acquaintance came home and called me to inform me about everything. I told them, "Give him all the items, and I will transfer the money to you online." They agreed, and we ended the call. After some time, they called me again and told me that the Amil Sahib, whom they had just visited, had passed away. They told me that he had no illness, nor was he facing any issues. He had gone to his room in perfect health, but when his wife went in after some time, she found him lifeless on the bed. After that, I visited many places to get myself checked. But everywhere, I received the same answer, that 7 to 8 people had done black magic on me. And whenever I got it removed, after a few days when I got checked again, I would receive the same response that the magic had been done again. I'm now exhausted from all of this and only put my trust in God. He is the greatest, and there is no one above him. That was my story. Thank you very much for sharing your story with us. Now let's move on to another story. My name is Mohammed Faraz and I have been working in Lahore for quite some time. I studied software engineering and am working in the same field here. Many incidents have happened to my entire family here, so it is obvious that those who have faced such things understand them better. I have many stories, but today, I want to share an incident that happened to me personally. Brother, the way you narrate stories is truly amazing. Thank you so much. I really enjoy listening to your stories. Now, I don't even remember when I started listening to your stories. All I remember is that since you had very few subscribers. Back then, you didn't even have a second channel. And I still remember the day when your channel got demonetized. I used to pray a lot for you at that time. Whenever you upload a story, I never miss it. I play your videos in the background while working so that I can listen to them as I go about my tasks. That way, my time is spent well. Instead of engaging in idle talk or sinful acts, it's much better to listen to something like this. So, brother, my story goes something like this. This incident is from the year 2023. As in every family, there are some issues, and our family was no exception. There were tensions with some relatives, as misunderstandings and disputes tend to happen over time. Some relatives always compete with you in everything, feeling envious, and unfortunately, some take their jealousy to the extent of using black magic and taweez, amulets. May God forgive them for getting involved in such forbidden acts. My story is somewhat related to this. I have some close relatives, but I won't mention their names here. It's possible that their children also listen to your stories, and I don't want them to feel hurt after hearing this. So here's what happened. A marriage proposal came from their family to ours. They proposed their daughter for me. My father discussed it at home, and after thinking about it for a couple of days, he declined the proposal due to several reasons. My cousin was a well-educated and good person, but there were many complications, and another major reason was that I, too, was not in favor of it. So my father refused. However, my cousin's mother took this rejection very seriously. We had never imagined that she would take it to such an extreme. We used to visit their house occasionally, though I personally went there very rarely, maybe 2 or 4 times in a year. After the rejection of the proposal, I had to visit their house 2 or 3 times in 1 month due to some work-related matters. As you know, in such visits, guests are usually served tea, snacks, or soft drinks. They used to do the same. But when I visited their house for the last time, unlike before, they insisted that I eat a proper meal before leaving. I refused, saying, "I can't stay for dinner." So they brought a sweet dish for me instead. My cousin's mother stood right next to me while I was eating. That was something I found very odd. She kept insisting, no, you have to eat this. You can't leave without eating it. I won't let you go unless you eat it. Since she was being so persistent, I couldn't refuse. I ate it just to respect her feelings. Then she said, "No, this is just a sweet dish. There's a full meal too." She handed me a plate of food. I ate it and then went home. The events I am narrating to you happened before October 2023. Somewhere during that time, they had been feeding me these things. Even before this, they had served me juice and other items given to me. Only God knows which thing had the strongest effect, but my suspicion was entirely directed toward that sweet dish. And this is where my ordeal began. A few days after that, I started having terrifying nightmares. Now, I am regular in my prayers and fasting, but to be honest, back then, I was not consistent. Sometimes I would pray and sometimes I would miss it. I was not strictly following all 5 daily prayers. Other than that, I worked as an online freelancer, so I mostly stayed at home. I had my own separate room where I worked. My younger brother also stayed with me. He was studying software engineering at that time and would sleep in the same room. My bed was on one side and his was on the other. During the day, I would mostly remain in my room. Slowly, this whole situation started with the nightmares. I became very restless and anxious, but at that time, I didn't pay much attention to it. I would recite Ayatul Kursi before sleeping, and that gave me some relief. One night, while I was sleeping, I suddenly felt unwell. As you might know, freelancers usually stay up late at night, but I tried to sleep by midnight or 1 a.m. because I completed most of my work during the day. That night, after I went to bed, my health started deteriorating. I felt very strange, and my eyes suddenly opened. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. Then I fell asleep again. The next morning, I woke up feeling very odd. From that point on, these experiences started happening every night. One night, I felt like someone was standing near me, staring at me. As soon as night fell, a strange uneasiness would take over me. Although I was not someone who feared such things or believed in unnecessary superstitions, I considered myself quite brave. This situation kept getting worse. Then one night, things escalated to the point where I started experiencing sleep paralysis. In Islam, it is believed that shayateen, devils, sit on a person's chest during sleep, while science refers to this as sleep paralysis. That night, I made sure to recite Ayatul Kursi and perform ablution before sleeping. I was knowledgeable about these matters, yet I still started experiencing this condition. It happened 2 to 3 times in a single night. When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat. I tried to sleep again after about an hour and a half, but the same thing happened once more. Then the situation reached an extreme. In a single night, I experienced this 3 to 4 times. I sat up holding my head, wondering, what is happening to me? Regardless, I read a lot of protective prayers and tried to sleep again, but as soon as I fell asleep, the same thing happened. I was once again trapped in sleep paralysis. It felt as if something had grabbed me tightly. As soon as I became conscious, I started gasping for breath, taking deep, panicked breaths, trying to regain control over myself. If you have ever experienced this, you know that when it finally lets go, we become fully conscious. But before that, no matter how much we try to scream, call out, or speak, we are unable to do anything. That night, when I finally came to my senses, I tried to shake off this experience, but I couldn't. In my heart, I immediately started reciting the 4 Quls and Ayatul Kursi, but nothing was working. As I told you, I had been enduring this suffering continuously, but that night turned out to be the most terrifying of all. That night, I felt as if someone was walking in the gallery outside my room. My room's door was closed, and my bed was placed right in front of it. I have a habit of sleeping on a charpai, traditional cot. I don't sleep on a bed. My blanket and other bedding were placed on my charpai. My head was toward the wall, and my feet were facing the door. It felt as if the moment the door opened, I would see that thing standing in front of me. Even with my eyes closed, I could sense that a massive shadowy figure was moving through the gallery and had stopped right outside my room's door. It felt like its entire form was looming over the door. I even sensed that it was about to open the door. In that moment, I tried to scream and call my brother, who was sleeping next to me, but I couldn't do anything. Even after reciting so many prayers, nothing was helping me. Eventually, that thing let go of me, and I was able to move again. I caught my breath, sat up, and realized that my entire body was drenched in sweat. I thought to myself, I won't sleep again tonight. But still, I tried to force myself to sleep. It's obvious. When you see something with closed eyes, you cannot just dismiss it, yet I tried. Here I want to mention something strange. Whenever I experienced sleep paralysis, I would wake up and check the time. It was always exactly 2:15 a.m. This became a daily occurrence. Every single night, this torment would happen at the same time. To this day, I don't understand what was so special about that hour. Even the night my health deteriorated the most, it was at that exact time. I hadn't told my family or anyone about what was happening to me. But after that incident, the very next day, I started feeling physically weak. Due to the stress of the past few days, my strength was fading, and I had lost my appetite. Then came the next night, which was even more terrifying than the one before. When I went to sleep at around 12 or 1 a.m., the same thing happened again. I kept reciting every prayer I knew, but nothing worked that night. This time, something different happened. That thing did not just stand outside my door, it opened the door and came inside. With my eyes closed, I saw it. It didn't stop at the door. Instead, it entered the room. I saw a strange black shadow, or was it smoke, standing right at the foot of my sharp eye. It was directly in front of me. I was terrified, thinking, this is it. It's going to kill me. This is my last night alive. I truly believed I would not survive this. I felt completely helpless. Now let me tell you something even stranger. My eyes were closed, yet that thing, it grabbed me. I was sleeping under a thick quilt, as it was bitterly cold in October and November, but that thing lifted me into the air. With the quilt still wrapped around me, I was floating 1 or 2 feet above my charpai. My legs were stretched out completely straight. I become so disturbed that I can't understand how I was lifted so high into the air. A strange turmoil takes over me. My mind is completely unable to comprehend anything, and I can't even recite any prayers. During this time, that thing pulls my quilt away with its claws and gathers it up. Now it's just me, just my body, floating in the air. Then, just like how you feel utterly exhausted after a fight, or after doing some physically demanding work, so drained that you can't even move and just want to sit still, something inside me starts fighting me. I feel as if something is attacking me from within. It's like my own body has turned against me. I am sweating so much that I can't even describe it. Even in extreme cold, no matter how much warm food you eat, you don't sweat like this under your blankets. But right now, my entire body is drenched in sweat. That thing is attacking me from the inside so violently that it's causing me immense pain. I feel an unbearable pressure in my ribs, chest muscles, and neck, as if something inside me is breaking apart. This ordeal continues for about 5 to 7 minutes. I keep calling out to God, begging for it to end. I don't give up. I keep reciting prayers non-stop. And after what feels like an eternity, somehow, by God's mercy, I am released from its grip. But believe me, when it finally lets go and I gather the courage to open my eyes, I find myself lying in the exact same position I was in when I had gone to sleep. Even my quilt is still draped over me as if nothing had happened, but my clothes and bed sheets are soaked in sweat, as if I had just taken a bath and laid down. When I wipe my forehead with my hand, it feels as though I've been working hard under the scorching sun. But even that wouldn't make me sweat this much. As soon as I try to move, I feel intense pain in my ribs and body. The next morning when I wake up, I tell my sister everything. While talking to her, I become emotional and say, something is happening to me. I tell her that I didn't want to share all this. I had thought things would get better on their own, but instead, they have only gotten worse. I tell her I haven't been able to sleep for several nights. Dark circles have formed under my eyes and my health is deteriorating. Oh, and there's one more thing I forgot to mention. When my sleep paralysis had just started, during these episodes, I would hear a strange voice in my ears. It sounded like a woman speaking in some bizarre, unknown language. She would try to say something to me, but her words were completely incomprehensible. She would whisper right into my ear, muttering things in that strange and unfamiliar language. And this didn't just happen once, it happened multiple times. This was back when my health hadn't deteriorated so severely yet. When I finally told my family about everything, my sister became extremely worried. She immediately told my father. That evening, my father called me to him and asked me about it. They don't do the next day. He takes me to a very good elderly person in our area. We meet them through Rapta Baba's friend's reference. When we go to meet them, they explain that such and such things are troubling the child. Believe me, I had already met them once or twice before, so my father took me to them. We reached their place after ASR prayer. They were standing outside some relative's house. When they saw me, they started looking at me very carefully. I was going towards them after parking my bike, and they kept looking at me continuously. I found this very strange. When I reached them, they asked my name, etc. And right there while standing told me that very bad amulets have been used on your child. They said that all this was done by your relatives and those things are behind what's troubling him. Because of this, his health is deteriorating. They also told that when you brought him here, I immediately felt his energy. Obviously, they had knowledge and such things with them. They didn't tell us much openly, but said this much. I immediately understood that this was a matter of black magic. Then they told me to read something, saying do this and that, and said they would also perform some rituals themselves. They performed some rituals on their own, and told us to do these rituals tonight itself. This ritual had many things to read, and it would take me 1/2 to 3/4 of an hour before sleeping. They said to read all this before going to bed, blow on yourself, and then sleep. But thank God I was very brave. I kept sleeping alone, neither scared before nor after. I kept sleeping there. When I started this ritual, they asked me after the first night if I felt unwell. I said no, just felt slight things. Then slowly those things started reducing. When we met them next time, my father started insisting that you tell us which relative it is. You know that religious scholars don't tell these things even if you are their very good friend. The reason is that there should be no fights in the family because people reach them with complaints, and these matters escalate a lot. So, my father assured them that we won't do anything like that, and we don't want to either. My father just wanted to know so that we could be careful with those people. Then, in the next meeting to verify, they gave me water after blowing on it and said that you have to drink it in 7 sips. And believe me, the taste of that water was changing with every sip. They would ask me how it feels now, first drink and then tell. So I told them that the taste of water is changing with every sip. That way they verified these things. Then they gave me a small piece of paper which had some Arabic verses written on it. They said that you have to sleep, keeping this piece under the pillow, and you have to do this ritual for 7 days so that you see them in your dream and sleep after offering Isha prayer. My sleeping routine was still the same, 1 to 2 o'clock. They said, hopefully, insha God, you will see something on the first day itself, but I didn't see anything for 3 days. So when we talked to them, they said someone else in the house can also do the ritual. So my younger sister is very observant in these things, so we said let's give it to her. You won't believe as soon as that amulet was given to her and she slept keeping it under the pillow. On the first night it came in her dream, and in the dream she sees that same relative of mine. She sees their face and they were bringing some food item to give. So when we tell them the next day, they say this is the description, this is everything. So then we got confirmed that our such relative it is. Then there were many things and matters that we disclosed to them. They said, okay, you should stay away from them. After this, our visits to their place became very less. My story isn't that horror-filled, but when you make a decision in life, obviously you have to face the troubles that come because of it. And it wasn't just about relationships. They were jealous of us siblings because of our studies and many other matters. Besides this, they did much more. I'm just sharing what they did with me or what my family is facing. I will share in another story. So I would just like to tell you that don't discuss your intentions with anyone. People go very far in jealousy, and if there are such matters, establish prayer and keep yourself pure, because these things lose their life before entering a pure body. So, in the way they told, I still read many things before sleeping. Thank God that I am fine now. Many people try to find information online by themselves, so it's better that you take guidance from a godly person. And even before that, take guidance from Quran and Hadith to keep yourself protected from these things. God Hafiz. So thank you very much for sharing your story with us, friends. The purpose of sharing this story is that we also learn from them and get lessons so that we never make such mistakes in our lives. The people who send me stories, they made these mistakes and these things happened to them. May God protect us from every evil eye, give us a long life with good health. Ameen. So friends, I hope you liked today's story. If you liked the story, don't forget to like the video, and if you're new to my channel, then subscribe to the channel too, press the bell icon and turn on all notifications. This will make you part of my Horror Stories family. Take very good care of yourself. Remember me in your prayers. We'll meet in another interesting story. Goodbye. See you next time.